Nisenan Mimiwakami, Lightem Lily Yapami, Nisenan Hedidi, Nisimkawa Hedidi, Ustama Hedidi. So I'm Shelly Covert. My given name in my tribe is Lightem Lily. And as you might be able to tell, I'm not a fluent Nisenan speaker. We are revitalizing our language. We don't have any fluent speakers, unfortunately, because the swiftness of what happened to the people here really just cut the culture in a strong, fast way. And so I'm very proud. The first thing I learned to do was introduce myself. So I'm very proud to be able to do that, and it just kind of rolls off my tongue like I am a fluent speaker. So, but a lot of the language I still speak as an American woman, I guess. In our language, the B's and the D's are imploded sounds. So I would say uba, which is really the only Nisenan word that remains on our landscape, the Yuba River, uba. And when I say hedidi, I should probably be saying hedidi. We suck in the D's, so I speak Nisenan with an American accent, I suppose. It's a Northern California American accent. But welcome, thank you. I'd like to start us off just by sharing some more language, and I'd like to sing. I'm not sure what I should sing today. Okay. All right. Solemeriquenam, 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 whipum kuyanim, whipum kuyanim, whipum kuyanim, whipum kuyanim. Yapai toto, yapai toto, yapai toto, yapai toto. Solemeriquenam, 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 solemeriquenam. Whipum kuyanim, whipum kuyanim, whipum kuyanim, whipum kuyanim. Yapai toto, yapai toto, yapai toto, yapai toto. Solemeriquenam, 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 solemeriquenam. Hui! 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 So welcome to this place. I'm not sure. I'm sure you got a little history on the way down.
Yeah, but I don't want to leave all the Nisenan history up to you.
And the destruction history of where we are and the destruction that happened to a lot of the waters and the land around here. The trees, like everything we see here is post gold rush. There are no no trees in sight. I know there's a 150-year-old yew tree in the vicinity, which I've heard. I'm not an arborist. Is that the right word? I'm not an arborist, so but I've heard they're very hard to grow or to make happy to grow and flourish. They are one of the trees that the men made their bows from because they're very bendy, I guess. Strong and bendy. But everything you see, I look around. We were just having this conversation before y'all came down, and it looks like we're in this, thriving forest. But if I try to look through my grandpa's eyes and glean the knowledge and the conversations that we had about landscape and trees and the plants that were cultivated, so intensely cultivated here, this is just a huge mess. Like, I can't see one tree within our viewscape right now that's actually thriving. Everything, even that big pine right there, is like that tree is way too big. And he always told me that we were talking about black oaks at the time, and he was still trading in his lifetime. We gather one of those big burlap sacks full of black oak, he still had a trade with somebody over the ridge on the other side. I think it was a Washoe man, and they would swap pine nuts for black oak acorn. And he was really proud of that they were still doing that. But even in his time, he told me, you know, this is this tree's space. This tree needs its sun. It's like the tree was an elder. And he showed me, it seems so simple and ridiculously simple. You go around and, you know, he always had long thumbnail. And you just pinch the tree off. Pinch them off all around like that's your job. If you're walking by and you see a bunch of small stuff and you're not pinching it off, you're being lazy. You know, is what I was told, not you folks. But so every time I walk around, I'm like, there I go through the forest being lazy again. I think maybe just because it's so overwhelming, it's like, what do we do? But there is a way, I think, when we get there, that we won't need big logging trucks and to cut roads in, breaking those ecosystems left and right with the, you know, the water that runs off the dirt and all the catastrophe that has from man and woman made, I guess. I don't know if I can just say man-made destruction on that one. I'm not trying to blame anybody.
Modern human destruction.
Thank you. I get stuck in those rabbit holes sometimes. We were also just talking about that, like men's obsession with these big machines. I just don't get it sometimes. Again, maybe there are women out there doing it too. Anyway, I'm off track. But someday, you know, you can literally, with the native burns, you know, they described these areas as park-like when the people first came. And it didn't happen like that, you know, by chance or naturally. Like that takes constant tending all the time to pick, to clear. And then people were using firewood. Like firewood was extremely valuable because they had fires burning 24/7 for everything. So you can imagine, you know, they're constantly clearing that stuff on the floor to get their wood for their fires and everything in life that they were using at the time. But I hope that someday, if we could get places cleared and healthy enough, but the kids can literally go out and be the ones doing that kind of forestation work. It doesn't have to be chainsaws and logging trucks. And if we could get to that spot, the fires, you know, are small and they're not catastrophic fires. They're little fires. When we were doing language reclamation work in Washington, D.C., we found a whole vocabulary about fire. And, you know, if you're doing it all the time, obviously you need verbiage to speak to one another. And like, Laura, here's the word for the fire's coming toward you, you know, and you're like, it's coming back your way or whatever. A whole vocabulary. Maybe firefighters have that vocabulary, but we as everyday folks, you know, if you're living around trees, we really should have that reintroduced into our lives, because we can't rely on the Forest Service or other agencies to deal with the problem that we have right now. There's just not enough people, and I don't know that there's enough money. So if we can learn and then teach our kids and get it back in that shape where it's a park-like setting, it would just be awesome for everybody. And as it's really strange, the position that I find myself in a lot of times, that especially, sorry, dang it, always gets me, as we lose more elders, you know. I think you hear this a lot in any family. There's always the one who hangs out with the old people and it just is obnoxiously gathering stories. Some of the family knows genealogies when some don't. And how does that happen? Because I'm an only child. I stayed in the house a lot with the old people because my cousins were kind of mean sometimes and got me in a lot of trouble. I love them. They are my siblings, really. But so, I mean, there are my own reasons why I stayed inside, and I was curious. And I asked, very much like my grandpa on my dad's side, who's non-native, my grandpa Ralph. He was in the 5th Marine Division, and he went to Iwo Jima. And he had his book from his division, and I was like 5 or 6. It's really kind of twisted, I guess, but I would look through his war book, and I could read, and I could find his name, and I would ask him stories like, which battalion were you in? What was your unit, and what did you do? And he said, oh, Cheryl Boom, those aren't stories for little girls, you know? And so, you know, because I am who I am, as I got older, I just kept asking, but I learned that he used a flamethrower in the caves there. And he had told me, you know, he was an alcoholic. And he had told me that the people that came out of the caves weren't men, that they were boys. And that really bothered him. He was older when he was put into service again. But then when I talked to my Grandpa Dutch, who's my native Nisenan elder, my mom's dad, when I asked him about the Indian boarding school experience, his answers were the same. You know, they're not stories for little kids. And I'm like, but he was a little kid. You know, he was 7 when he was taken. His youngest sister was 6. Aunt Martha was 4, actually. So they were taken away. But those stories, you know, a lot of times, I guess it's just my personality, but I have a lot of those stories that even my mom and her sisters don't have. Because I asked, and I remember my mom used to kick me under the table because I didn't know there's so much cultural protocol, like you don't question an elder, can't you see they're uncomfortable, shut up, you know, kick, pinch, whatever it was at the time. But even in my limited knowledge that I have compared to when the tribe was intact and the culture was intact, the connection that keeps coming more and more to light is I know we all have to work and make money to have our houses, and now my grandma used to laugh at me because I was so obsessed with, like, she would always write down how you make acorn soup and all these things to do, and how she could skin a deer in, like, I mean, just like nothing. I mean, it was incredible. And I mean, that's a skill for anybody, right? It doesn't have to be an old Indian lady. But, you know, she would show you got to get your fist in there and twist your fist and like all these things. And I'm like, that's really gross, Grandma. You know, I really don't want to do that. But those stories lead everything for me. I think that's so important for me to first learn how to verbalize what the heck I'm trying to say. But the landscape should be all of our jobs. I mean, in a perfect world, I know that we all live on streets, and I couldn't give up my car. That was the point I was going to say. Is Grandma used to laugh, and she said, one of you girls couldn't live a day in life without your electricity and your faucets, and you know, and they did. She lived out in the woods, and they didn't have a house, and luckily she was able to. I mean, they starved. They were very, very poor. And this was a time when there was still the sign in the local tavern that said no dogs and no Indians. And I guess because Grandpa was a really very upstanding person, they would let him in the back and give him food for the kids and the family to bring home. But she was able to survive in a way that I probably couldn't do. One time our washing machine broke down, and I was helping her twist the blanket. Of course, the blankets were in there, and my hands were, I don't know if you have ever done that, but my hands were raw from one blanket. And she would just laugh, and because I'm so obsessed with, like, well, how'd you make the food in the baskets? And she's like, you know, you guys are so, it was hard. It was really, really hard. And that point, jumping to taking care of the landscape is hard. You know, for a lot of us, I live in town in Grass Valley. We used to live way out, but I have never experienced that hardship. I drive my car, I live on the streets, we've got little space heaters right now when it's cold, you just, you know, plug it in and turn it on. But what it comes down to, all of it is the health of the environment. And I've never seen myself as an environmentalist or an activist or any of the ists. Maybe they're all ists, I don't know, those titles. But where it's coming from is the center of those conversations with my mom, with my family, that are everything needs water. And if, you know, my mom was telling me when they were younger, and she's 75 now, you know, you could go and drink from any of the waterways around here. Not any of them, actually that's not true. So my friend lived right on the creek, and Grandpa and my mom were dropping us off there when I was in high school, and I had my swimsuit and towel because we were going to go swimming, and he's like, I wouldn't get in that water if I were you. And I was like, why? And he said, this is the dirtiest water around. That was a pretty good impression too, if you know my grandma. If I do it real good, I can make my mom and her sisters cry. You sound just like Dad, oh my God. And I know, I'm rotten. But you know, with all that being said, obviously it was the mining that put our waters in this way, and I mean, it's really up to us. And I don't know how to convey this to folks who live in the city. I mean, I'm trying to convey it to myself, and I just live on South Auburn Street in Grass Valley. But the importance of many hands have to be in charge of tending our forests and our waterways and everything. And I'm not trying to be anti-establishment or anti-organization or anything. I have so many disclaimers. Not trying to say that they're not doing a good job. I just don't think there are enough hands and enough money to get out there and get it done in the way it really needs to be. If we could just get back to that reset where it's in a position where we can take care of it ourselves, where our children can literally walk out and pick the trees off. I mean, I think that's a great idea. Okay, before you guys get TV, before you get on your Nintendo, go take, you know, do the remediation on the left side of the creek up there and get back when you're done, you know. Hopefully one day it'll be that way. And then I also wanted to, I never mention my friends who come with me, and I was just inspired to do so today. From the Great California Condor. You know, the condor, the salmon, the great antelope and elk herds that used to be here and blacken the hills, as they said. All of the duck and animals that were here that blackened the skies because there were so many. It was easy pickings for the Nisenan people. I mean, we were very rich for trade because we had so much here. Our plants, some of our healers, especially the women who used the plants, they would trade out into different towns down in different tribes even for their healing because we had like the cache of the plants here, which, you know, I've heard say like 70% of our native plants are extinct and gone. Again, I'm not a good number person, but I feel the impact of these things, and we just are working on a grant with the Nevada County Library and the California State Library, and we're writing a book, a children's book. And so I used my grandma, Anita Ope, as the character, and it's her dance where she goes to her special place in the forest, and it's all written in Nisenan, which is really hard because, like I said, I'm not a fluent speaker, and it's even harder writing because there are 5 writing systems that the linguists have used. So it's really tough. I just wrote a song and did a project with a friend over the last weekend, and I'm trying to write, and I had 3 writing systems in one sentence, and so I sent it to the linguist to say, could you please make sure I'm not, you know, saying something, because sometimes if you hold one vowel longer, I'll tell you that I probably wouldn't share it in this mixed group right here, but the meanings can change from something very just like that's a tree to something totally different. So, but she's like, I think your orthography and sentence structure is good, but your writing systems, and she just had like 3 question marks. She's just like, what's up with that? And I'm like, I don't know, I just was trying to get it on the page. But in the book, Anita Ope is calling, she says, Moloch, 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 and that's condor in Nisenan. And then Moloch comes and arrives at the fire, and then she calls Kappa, 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 and the great grizzly will come. And so we call the eel and all the different animals around the fire, and then they all have their regalia on, and they dance around the fire, and it starts to rain. I'm giving away the whole book, and it's so beautiful.
Preview.
And then they turn to spirits, and then she's in bed, she's dreaming. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to dream all of these things back into being, so that our landscapes are accessible for the old and the young. I mean, let alone us. I can't go and get, do I even have necklaces on today? Our pine nuts, which are from the, it's called the digger pine, which they referred to us as digger Indians, which Grandpa said is the same of the other word with the N on the front. It was a very derogatory term. But the pine nuts, you know, they call it the women's money, because we traded and adorned them on our dresses and jewelry. But I can't even find trees that produce the big old pine nuts. And you can't get to them because there's so much, what is that called on the floor? Debris? Yeah. All over, all over that so once it hits, and then you're in competition with squirrels and all the other animals, of course, to get to them. But, you know, that's not good for trade. That's not good for commerce. Yeah, having a clean forest floor for us, for any part of cultural reclamation, is they're so tied together that I literally can't go. I could sit around and want to make necklaces all day, or make my dress for my daughter and I, and adorn it with pine nuts. And it's so hard for me to find a place that's safe and accessible to get the materials, and that's the most common thing. I mean, then you start getting into the basket materials and the medicines that, Grandpa's, I wouldn't eat that. I wouldn't eat that if I were you. Because it's growing on the side of the road, and it's getting all the stuff. And then I've noticed driving down to the Bay Area, there are big farms with looks like lettuce or something growing on the side of the road, and I'm like, Grandpa said that wasn't a good idea. So I mean, what are we putting in our bodies? I start freaking out again because, but if I could leave you all just with a little something, we're a terminated California tribe. So we were federally recognized here. So the reservation was on Cement Hill. It was 76 acres, and then it was shimmed down because they had to deed away a half acre for the airport that's built up there. But that was where the reservation was, and it was recognized until 1964 when we were terminated. So we're one of 3 California rancherias that was congressionally terminated, that remains terminated. There are 41 other California rancherias that have been restored, and so this year,
How many?
41.
41 have been restored?
Yes. And we actually went to federal court and lost our court case. We were in court almost 8 years, and we lost on the 6-year statute of limitations. Which all of the other 41 rancherias have been restored were also outside the 6-year statute, but the government didn't bring it up as its defense. And so I'm not a lawyer, but even I can see that there's some injustice there, some deep injustice. And so our only recourse as a terminated tribe is legislation. And I hope so, because with pulling my little fiddle, with every year, it gets a little harder. We lose the elders. We get further and further. I would say that we assimilate a little bit more every generation, because we don't have a land base and we don't have our sovereignty to keep that. And I tell you what, with the social protocols and stuff, that they're still intact in many pieces of our family is incredible. The way that you listen to elders and you get all your, I sound so wrong, you get all your permissions. Like when I open my mouth, I'm speaking for my tribe, and I cannot say things that are going to harm them in a roundabout way. I'm very, very, very conscientious of that. And as any type of leader, that is my responsibility. If I'm a little bit more privileged, I suppose, because I do have lighter skin than a lot of my tribal family, I speak fairly well because I spent so much time with my dad's mom, and she was like, "That's not mayonnaise, it's a mayonnaise. And, you're not gonna say that. I ain't got it. I don't have it." I mean, so I do. She did the same thing to my mom, which was her mother-in-law, which is a little kind of not so funny when you think about it, but it's my responsibility, and I do get a little tired sometimes, but I know that my family isn't in the same set of privilege that I am, and if I have a voice, which I do, which I can't deny because I'm so loud and just chatty, I guess, and I do like people, and I like to talk, and I like to change people's minds. And but if I were to leave anything with you guys today, if you could take away, is to remember the Nisenan and remember the Nevada City Rancheria. And hopefully soon, I think it's this year, 2020 seems to be the one that's feeling a little bit buzzed. This needs to be, people need to know who we are, because if we go through legislation, they're going to be like, who? I mean, how do you influence outside of Grass Valley, let alone the state of California, let alone like Ohio or Delaware? Like some other random state who are like, I don't know who those folks are. So the story's got to be so strong, and the show of injustice that's been happening continuously, and it has not been righted since there was a genocide here, and that's a word I used to pad with a cultural genocide. And it's not until I got older and started reading and got into all of my research with the genealogy and the source materials that it's undeniable.
If you're paying somebody to kill off somebody else to get them out of the way, and you're taking their children from them, I mean, there's not a whole lot of other words that you can use. I know it's not funny. I don't mean to laugh. It's just so absurd to me. But if we can remember this story, especially in California, this, gold was discovered here. The Nisenan people were the ones who were the first to meet that onrush of all that. And I just hope that when the time comes, people will remember who we are and be able to stand up, and not even stand up, because I'm not necessarily a stand-up hold sign person at all, because that's very scary to me. But throwing the support out and signing something if it needs to be signed, or if you want to support our nonprofit, that's great. But most of all, what I feel, the magic's in the word of mouth. And so I hope that you remember who we are, and I just want to send you on your way with one more song. Were any of you there last night to hear at the opening that heard the song? Just a couple? Okay, I'll share that one again then. I don't like to redo all my sets, but so this for us as the Nisenan people, all life comes from Estimyanim, and when we die, our spirit returns there, and then we go off to the Milky Way. And my grandpa said it wasn't polite to call it that, but it's the Sutter Buttes, the little mountain range here. That's our place of where we come from and where we go when we die. So I'll sing this song, and it really is just a luck song. It's singing to the mountain, saying, see us, hear us, send us some luck and blessings, and help us out. Help us out, little great mountain. We need some help and support. So I'll leave you guys with this.